Okay, good morning again. Okay, did you have a great day yesterday? Did you have a great day yesterday? So do you feel yourself as a part of this movement now? All right? Okay. Well, we say, I am CADCA, we are CADCA. Okay, we are the movement. We are the movement. And great to see many of you this morning. We have a wonderful day for you today, a packed day that includes transporting you to Capitol Hill. But we're going to start with this plenary this morning. I'm going to introduce a great friend and our champion in just a few moments, Sue Thau, followed by a congressional panel that you're going to enjoy and appreciate later in the morning. We're going to get you over by buses to Capitol Hill. You're going to have a wonderful reception over there, and then go visit, as we say, storm the Hill. It's important that you do that. So it's going to be a great day. So we're excited about that, and we're looking forward to it. Capitol Hill Day is something that's critical to us. And as I travel the country and make comments, sometimes I'm asked, why do we have the National Leadership Conference in Washington annually? And I explain to them that Washington, D.C. is corporate headquarters for us. All of the senior leadership that's important to this field, a great deal, I should say, of the senior leadership that's important to this field resides here in Washington. And it's important that the power of our movement is impressed upon them, the staffers that ably support all of our representatives, the representatives and senators themselves, our senior and federal leaders, and if we were to move this someplace else, it just simply wouldn't work. And that's why we've been able to do the great work, to be funded in the manner that we have over the last 20 plus years by having it here in Washington. So I hope you understand that and appreciate that and agree with that philosophy. It's important that we do that. So as I said earlier, we have a great lineup for you today. I am thrilled that you are part of our Capitol Hill plenary. I know you're going to look forward to hearing from our members of Congress and then going over to Capitol Hill. Also, to be sure to use the CADCA app. How many of you are using the app? Have you downloaded it and getting current information and taking advantage of all the information there, your appointments on Capitol Hill, the bus schedule? Everything is in the app, so I want you to take advantage of that and use it so you can be current and know exactly what is happening. It's important that you do so. But I want to start this morning by introducing a true champion that has been leading our field since the beginning of CADCA. I think all of you know that we came out of a presidential commission in October of 1992. Sue Thau joined the movement in January of 1993 and has been our voice in Washington since then. She is one of the most powerful people on Capitol Hill as far as being able to relate to, understand, and deal with all political parties, regardless of their persuasion, and has been just a tremendous advocate. When you go back and look at the dollars that we've been able to save for you for this field, not the dollars that we look after and manage for the field, but the dollars that we've been able to save and restore for the field during her tenure, those dollars now, and let's thank her, have almost reached $3 billion. $3 billion. You know that she, along with some colleagues, took to Congress on behalf of CADCA, the Drug-Free Communities Program that was launched in 1998. A small program then of about $10 million, funding a few hundred coalitions, that has grown to $92 million annually. It has funded more than 2,000 coalitions and currently funding over 700. And she has led our fight to ensure that the dollars are going to continue to be there, and we are expecting to have an even larger cohort of new coalitions next year than we had this year. So what exciting news in this very constrained resource environment. One of the many accomplishments that Sue has achieved for us. She added to the drug-free community program when the president came to CADCA to reauthorize it, the National Coalition Institute. She's added to the House things like the STOP Act, and we'll continue to do that to make sure that we build upon the foundation, and we see the drug-free community program as the foundation so others can benefit from that as well. A tireless effort on her part. She kept the Safe and Drug-Free School and Communities program alive for many, many years. Unfortunately, we were not able to save that program, and that's so unfortunate. But I want you to help me thank Sue for her tireless leadership, for the team that she has back at CADCA as well, for what she's done for this field, and the two decades of work that she's given to us, and that work continues to be extremely strong and vital. So let's welcome to the stage our fearless leader, Sue Thau. You got your way.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to CADCA's Forum 24 Capitol Hill Day. Now, over the past 24 years, you in the field, working hand in hand with us at CADCA, have built a national movement that has become a truly powerful force, a movement that has real influence in our nation's capital. We're all here today at CADCA's 24th Leadership Forum, thousands strong. The room is full. This is fantastic. And we're at a forum whose entire theme this year is the power of the movement. Because we all understand that working together, we can make sure that the resources are there for all of us to realize the two themes for this year's Capitol Hill Day. And they are strike out underage drinking and strike out drug abuse. Yep. And we chose these themes this year because the power of the movement is really about all of us working together on the same team. And we need to apply what Hank Aaron said about baseball to our movement today. We need to always keep swinging, whether we're in a slump or getting trouble getting our messages out, or, as we know we are, we're up against major movements that are pushing folks to use alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and other drugs. And the only thing that we have to do as a field and a movement is to keep swinging. Our ability to stay in the game and to keep swinging, regardless of whether things are going our way today, is why we're here 2,500 strong. We're still in the game. And today is our day to make sure our movement can sustain the influence and the power we've achieved over the past 24 years. And today's the day our movement will build an even stronger foundation of support on Capitol Hill through what you're going to do this afternoon. Now, together we've cultivated some amazing Hill champions who have really supported alcohol, tobacco, and drug prevention generally, and the drug-free communities coalitions specifically. But we really need many more champions for our work on Capitol Hill at this point. Many of our strongest Hill supporters have actually left office over the past few years. Some have retired, some have lost elections, a couple have passed away, and a couple of our really, really big champions that are still on the Hill are going to be retiring at the end of this session of Congress, like Senator Tom Harkin from Iowa, he's winning one of our Congressional Leadership Awards today. And Congressman Frank Wolf from Virginia, who is unbelievably supportive of everything we do, he's also going to be retiring. So We found those champions through our people in Iowa and Virginia. It wasn't just by mistake that they came to us. So every one of you today really needs to see if you can't make your senators and your member of Congress new champions for our field, because Capitol Hill days past have yielded all of the most important congressional champions our field has ever had. So today you're going to hear directly from some of our Hill champions who are going to be participating in a roundtable discussion. So they're not going to each get up and give a speech and leave the way this usually goes. We re-engineered and designed today so that they're actually going to all be here together and have a discussion to talk about why this is a priority for them, why they came to champion this field for us, and to give you some tips about how to cultivate your members to be champions like they are. And that's going to be moderated by Karen Bass, who a lot of you know was a coalition leader and a CADCA member, and now she's a member of Congress, so very cool. But we need you to cultivate members of Congress to become major champions for our field, because we wouldn't have accomplished what we've accomplished over the past 24 years without major champions on Capitol Hill. Now, as I said yesterday in the Power of the Plenary, the Power of the Movement Plenary, since arriving at CADCA 21 years ago, and General Dean just said this, our movement has saved about $3 billion with a B, dollars. That's a really amazing success that all of us have achieved by working together in support of our field. So I want to say thank you to every one of you. And again, I love the baseball stuff. I have to say, imitation is the highest form of flattery. I was walking around on the Hill last spring, and all these people had these cool baseball things, and I was like, who do you represent? And they're like, oh, we represent the ALS Lou Gehrig Foundation. So I actually stole the baseball theme. But you'll see my remarks are threaded with fabulous baseball sayings, the American pastime. So to paraphrase what Babe Ruth said, we have never allowed the fear of striking out to keep us from playing the game. And I got to tell you, as a field, this year, we did incredibly well in the appropriations process for fiscal year 2014. Yep. Just passed a few weeks ago. And we did incredibly well because we're still in the game. And we know how to play the game, using the full power of our movement. Okay, so using our movement, the Drug-Free Communities program, as General Dean just said, was funded at $92 million. Okay, that was a $4.6 million increase from last year. Now, what makes this really an amazing victory is that the House had only allocated $88 million for the program. Now, the Senate did put in the 92. But as anybody who follows what happens in appropriations knows, if the House and Senate have different numbers, they usually split the difference between the two numbers in conference. So we should have gotten a final number of about 90 million. But due to our collective, consistent, and effective advocacy, the appropriators decided to give the program, the DFC program, the full $92 million. And we have one of the appropriators sitting in the audience, and she can attest at the end of this that this doesn't happen by chance. This happens because of forceful and effective advocacy. It happens because members hear from their constituents that this program works and it matters. So this year, there are going to be 180 new grants awarded for drug-free communities, the third highest number of grants ever awarded in the history of the program. And we had some other fantastic appropriations successes as well. And we have for years because of Senator Tarm Harkin, who unfortunately is retiring. But the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention had a few really big victories that we helped achieve as well. The SPF-SIG Partnership for Success grants are totally intact. They were level funded at $109 million. And we worked very hard to make that happen because it's a really critical program. The STOP Act was fully funded in CSAP at $7 million, with the full $5 million appropriated for the Community Enhancement Grant Program that goes to existing and past drug-free communities grantees. And get this, the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant got a $100 million increase over last year, a $100 million increase. And for us, the prevention people, the 20% prevention set aside is totally intact in the block grant. Congratulations. We fought for 2 years to make that happen. So these are all really hard-fought victories for our field. This stuff doesn't just happen by itself. And our movement was a driving force behind every one of those victories. So as you can see, not only are we still in the game, our movement's putting runs on the scoreboard. It is. And today is the day to make sure that we can sustain the successes we've had in past years, including just this past year, 2014, in the appropriations process, so that we can really sustain and build on the influence and the power we've had. So to continue to be effective in reducing youth substance abuse rates in your communities, in your states, throughout the nation, and now really around the world, we need to say in unison with one voice and one message that our entire field, the entire continuum of care from universal prevention through recovery support, all need to be fully funded. Yep. We all need to speak up and share the great news that alcohol and tobacco use are down among youth to among the lowest levels in the history of the Monitoring the Future survey. That's historic. 37 years, we're at about the lowest levels in the history of the survey. Okay. And those are both amazing prevention success stories that were achieved through what we all know are the keys to reducing the use of any substance, reducing access and availability, changing social norms, and getting out the research and the science about their respective dangers and harms. And doing all of this with enough scale and scope that it can actually change population-level rates of use. We've done it for tobacco, we've done it for underage drinking. It's amazing. But the troubling news, and Nora Volkov did such a great job explaining this yesterday. Yeah, please join me. Jeff Laredo from NIDA is here in thanking Dr. Volkov. Yeah, she's my idol. The troubling news is we're seeing just the opposite happen with marijuana at this point in time. Fewer youth believe smoking marijuana is dangerous. And the reason isn't that drug prevention doesn't work. The reason is that medical marijuana and marijuana legalization initiatives have been pushed in more and more states. Marijuana use has been totally normalized in every media, newspapers, radio, TV shows, movies. Now, it's being touted in billboards around the nation that started in Portland, Maine, basically saying marijuana, the safe, low-calorie alternative to alcohol. Yeah, this is what we're up against. So as a result of all of this, we've seen youth attitudes about the dangers of using marijuana go way down, and we've seen marijuana use rates going up. And a new RAND study by Rosemarie Pikula has confirmed that it is all about access and availability. In states that have increased access and availability through opening pot shops and dispensaries and grow sites, guess what? Marijuana use has gone up in those states at rates not seen in any other state. We have the research. That is the truth. Okay. And we knew that that was going to be the truth based on prevention science. So I want to be really clear about this. Whatever's going on around marijuana in your state, our movement's mission to keep kids and communities safe and drug-free has not changed. Our skills, our expertise, our science-based knowledge are actually needed now more than ever. Now, although it would be really easy to let this marijuana issue overwhelm all of us, we need to keep our eye on the ball, and we need to remember what we do best. which is to look at the community conditions that cause kids to use or abuse any substances, from alcohol to tobacco to marijuana to synthetic drugs to the abuse of prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, meth, heroin, whatever newfangled trend we see coming our way. We need to work as comprehensively as possible across all community sectors to reduce access and availability to youth, to get out science-based facts about whatever ATOD issue we're facing in our communities as best we can. That's our job, and we're going to continue to do it, right? Okay. So my best advice to everybody today regarding what to say about marijuana in your Hill meetings is as follows. First, please don't just ignore the marijuana issue altogether because it's very contentious and difficult. It is. It's very contentious and difficult. But do keep your messages about marijuana focused on youth. Focused on what you're seeing in your community as far as youth attitudes about the dangers of regular marijuana use going down and why that's happening, about youth marijuana use going up and why that's happening in your community, what you're seeing in terms of diversion of marijuana to youth, especially those of you in states that have opened up dispensaries or have grow sites that have opened and are open for business. What's happening? Tell them. But stick to youth when broaching the marijuana issue today on Capitol Hill. Because the one thing everybody on Capitol Hill can agree on regarding marijuana issues is that increased marijuana use among youth is a bad thing and needs to be prevented, okay? That's what we know how to do. So don't get sucked into focusing so much time and attention in your meetings on the marijuana issue that you fail to have time to raise all the other major alcohol, tobacco, and other drug issues that have to be addressed in your Hill meetings today, which are critical if we're going to make sure that our field is fully funded next year in 2015 and beyond. To fight this, we have to still be in business, people. So we have to fight for the funding for our field. So yes, talk about marijuana and what's going on in your communities today in your meetings. So talk about if you're seeing youth attitudes being impacted in your community because of what's going on with the legalization and medical marijuana debates. If marijuana use is going in the wrong direction with their constituents' children and their constituents, tell them. If you have marijuana use rates in your community or state that are way above the national averages in monitoring the future, tell them. And if you have youth in your meetings, how many of you are bringing youth up to Capitol Hill with you in your meetings? Okay. By all means, put a face on the marijuana data and by using the youth to share the message that they are hearing in your communities about what's going on. How these messages about marijuana are impacting them and their peers and the decisions kids are making whether or not to use and how early because of these missed messages. But don't spend the bulk of your time in the meetings only focused on marijuana, or you're never going to get to talk about all the major progress we've made in tobacco, underage drinking, and a host of other drugs. I mean, we've actually made progress on the prescription drug issue. We've done great things. So don't only talk about the problems, share your successes. On the other hand, we're still facing major problems, like underage drinking, synthetic drugs, the rampant misuse of prescription and over-the-counter drugs, and the resurgence of deadly heroin. In fact, how many of you are here from Pennsylvania? Yeah. One day last week, 22 people died in one day in Pennsylvania from heroin overdoses because the heroin was laced with fentanyl. We have some really major issues that we're dealing with, and we can't lose sight of the fact that we're responsible for dealing with all of the alcohol, tobacco, and drug issues that affect our communities. So, the substance abuse prevention field, despite the great successes we've had in 2014 in the appropriations process, is still facing some unique challenges right now. And I want to go through one of the ones I think is really interesting and make sure we all understand this. With all the talk about prevention now being such a gigantic national priority, and the talk about how prevention is now covered as a benefit under the Affordable Care Act, which is great, there are some in Congress and some in the field and some in the administration who mistakenly think that because the Affordable Care Act could pay for prevention, that the type of universal community-based alcohol, tobacco, and drug prevention strategies that we're most involved in, they think that maybe this is covered. The reality is the benefits for prevention in the Affordable Care Act that can get reimbursement start at screening. Okay, start at screening, because the medical model is not a public health model, and the Affordable Care Act is based on a medical model. So it does not include what we think of as universal prevention at all. So today, please make the case loud and clear that our core federally funded alcohol, tobacco, and drug prevention programs, the few we have left, to include the Drug-Free Communities Program, the programs in the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, including the SPF-SIG, Partnership for Success grants, the STOP Act, Coalition Enhancement grants, the 20% set aside in the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant. These all must continue to be funded and need to be funded at the highest possible levels, because we are a critical component of our nation's ability to reduce youth alcohol, tobacco, and drug use on a population level, which means we could help produce major cost savings in the overall healthcare system. But be clear, we are not integrated into that healthcare system. We're not actually eligible for any reimbursements under that system. So in your Hill packets today, you're going to see a handout entitled Strike Out Drug Abuse, Invest in Drug Prevention. And it shows that over the past 10 years, funding for alcohol, tobacco, and drug-specific prevention for our field has been cut by 48%. In no small part because, as General Dean said, we finally lost the Safe and Drug-Free Schools program, and ONDCP's media campaign's not funded anymore either. So we're down 48% in 10 years, but the programs we have left, we're really doing well for, right? Really advocating as a movement. Okay. So today we have to make a very strong case that ATOD prevention needs to remain what I will call differentiated. And what do I mean by differentiated? We must continue to get federal discretionary funding for our programs that fund our field, so that this core set of programs I just mentioned are still funded and aren't cut. We need the Hill to get the message loud and clear that what we do works, it's unique, and the few programs that are left that support our work cannot be cut. They must continue to be fully funded. Because if these programs go away, make no mistake about it, we won't be here to be celebrating next year. Those are the programs that fund community-based alcohol, tobacco, and drug prevention, and you're the ones who do it. So we need to be differentiated. We need to continue to be funded. So please make sure that all of your members understand that alcohol, tobacco, and drug prevention needs to be seen as a major priority on the Hill. Because we can tie every major issue people on Capitol Hill care about to our field, whether it's reducing healthcare costs, increasing high school and college graduation rates, fixing America's schools, or helping more middle and lower income people get and keep jobs. None of this can be done without a major focus on reducing alcohol, tobacco, and drug abuse, and addiction, use, abuse, and addiction, right? Okay. And we have the data to show that prevention and treatment and recovery work, that investments in our entire field are needed to reduce healthcare costs, raise academic achievement, and get people back to work. Community coalitions work. What you are doing, you guys really are the coaching staff. You're the ones who lay out the data, the strategic playbook for what your community needs and how to make it happen. And you also ensure that there's bench strength for your community to effectively address all of the issues you're facing, because you have all the relevant sectors involved in what you're doing. So today, we have a very few specific asks for you to make in your Hill meetings. The first one is just make sure all the programs that fund our field, every one of them, and we have two different lists of them. One is on the alert on your chairs and one's in your packet. Simply tell your members which of those programs are important to you, which of those fund your work, and ask them to watch out for those programs in the FY15 appropriations process. I make that plea when I speak every year, but it's really important to put a face on those funding streams so that people understand the good work you do is because in no small part of some of these programs. So make sure to ask for highest possible levels for all the programs that fund our field in your work. The second ask, specifically ask that they fund the Drug-Free Communities program in fiscal year 2015 at no less than the $92 million we got for the program in 14. Okay, we need more community coalitions, yes or no? We need more community capacity. Please make that case, because we know this is the only federal alcohol, tobacco, and drug program that goes directly from the federal government to communities. And the program has been proven effective in reducing 30-day alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana rates among junior high and high school students in funded communities, according to the program's national evaluation. We have a great two-sided one-pager in your Hill Day packets entitled, "To Strike Out Youth Drug Use, Invest in the Drug-Free Communities Program." And on it, it has the colored chart from the national evaluation included in it that visually shows the reductions from the program and that it's effective. Please use it, give it to your members, and ask them to support the program in your meetings. The third specific ask is to ask your members of the House of Representatives, especially if they're Republicans, to come on as co-sponsors to the bill to reauthorize the Sober Truth on Preventing Underage Drinking, the STOP Act. It was introduced last year during CADCA's forum, actually. Sue Roybal-Allard, the main Hill champion for that, with Representative Wolf. They came here and they introduced the meeting the day of the forum. The House bill number is HR 498. Anyway, the bill has to be passed this year because our lead champion in the House, the Republican Frank Wolf, is retiring from Congress. And here's where the champion thing becomes really important. On the Senate side, we've lost every single one of our important champions over the past 3 or 4 years. Either they lost an election like Mike DeWine in Ohio, they retired like Senator Dodd from Connecticut, or in the case of the esteemed Frank Lautenberg from New Jersey, he passed away last year. So we don't have any Senate champions for the STOP Act reauthorization, and we really need them because there's no Senate bill that's been introduced. We have to find new Democratic and Republican Senate champions for the STOP Act so that it can actually be introduced in the Senate this year. We need that bill passed. Now, the reauthorization means something to you guys. It builds and adds authorization for the community enhancement grants so that there'd be more money for those and more of them would be available. This is an incredibly effective, tiny little program. As you all know, $50,000 enhancement grants to drug-free communities, grants, former and current. And the demand for this program was so high last year that almost 300 people applied for 17 grants. Do we need more STOP Act grants? Yeah. So please make sure that you use the one-pager in your Hill packet saying, "Strike out underage drinking, reauthorize the Sober Truth on Preventing Underage Drinking Act." And the last and the fourth specific ask is just ask your member of the House of Representatives to join the Youth Drug Prevention Caucus. This little caucus makes sure that our issues are on the radar screens of members of Congress, and the more members that are on the caucus, the more we have a megaphone in the House of Representatives about our issues. Now, we have something special in the packets today that we actually put a lot of time and effort into. It's a little brochure, and we have 3 of them, one for your member of the House and one for each of your senators. And it's called Helping to Reduce Drug Use Through Coalitions, a Guide for Members of Congress. It's fabulous. It's a quick and easy thing about who we are, what we do, and why members of Congress should want to be included in our movement. How many of you have your members of Congress, local district staffs come to your coalition meetings? Okay, well, everybody needs to raise their hands, and this little booklet will help you explain to them why they should care. It's not just about funding. It's about they have a megaphone, issues that they know their constituents care about, they're more likely to champion. So use it to start a conversation about getting your members more involved. So, over the past 24 years, we have become a force in Washington, a true movement that has power, in no small part because of CADCA's annual Capitol Hill Days. But folks, we all know this. Power in DC is fleeting, and new folks come into office every 2 years, and the big issues change from crisis to crisis. And even when we win, we have to defend what we've won to prevent it from being undone. And the courage and determination of our previous Capitol Hill participants has paid off big time for our field, because many of you decided to take today as a personal and professional responsibility and priority for you to do something for our field. And I'm sure those of you who've done it thought it was fun and interesting as well. How many of you have gone to Capitol Hill Days past, thought it was a really fabulous experience? Okay, thank you. But it turned out those of you who actually had the courage and the will to go up there accomplished a lot more than you ever imagined you could. Because working together and using CADCA's Capitol Hill Day as a springboard, our movement has used its collective power to save many of the programs that fund our field from being cut. We've worked to see existing programs plussed up. We worked to get new programs in the federal budget, like the Drug-Free Communities Program, the Stop Act program. We took those ideas to Congress. You helped us, right? Those of you who are around, because of our collective efforts. But we can't take being a force on Capitol Hill for granted, because if we do, the power of our movement will wane. And to be taken seriously as a force in DC, you gotta show up, be visible, speak out. Really important, the act of showing up is important. We've had many major successes. We've had a couple of failures. But are we still in the game? Yeah, we're still in the game. And we have the opportunity to help members of Congress understand that to strike out underage drinking, they need to help reauthorize the Stop Act. And to strike out youth drug abuse, they need to fully fund the Drug-Free Communities Program. We all have a chance to be up at bat today with the ability to get some hits, to get on base, and to keep on playing the game, and to potentially get some runs on the board. We need new champions. Help us. You all know what you need to do today. Just get on the buses at the end of this plenary session, go up to Capitol Hill, and do it. Thank you. Okay. So I think we have time, because I haven't seen that our Hill panel is coming out yet, for one of our award winners from this year for our Advocate of the Year Awards, Karen Murray, to please come up. Karen is amazing. She's been involved in coalition work since 1977 when she coordinated Miami University's involvement in the Ohio College President's Initiative to reduce binge drinking. Because of the coalition, she has actually gotten Speaker Boehner to care about this issue, and she's an amazing advocate for our field. She's worked at all levels. She's a great friend, and I want you to help me welcome my good friend Karen Murray to the stage. Karen Murray, Ohio.
Good morning. You guys look beautiful. Oh.
You're taller than I am.
Thank you. My name's Karen Murray, and I'm from Butler County, Ohio, and I am CADCA. I stand before you today. I am a voice from the field. As Sarah Bareilles so boldly sings, I want to see you be brave. We're called and we are chosen to be the voices and the faces of our community. It's a calling, isn't it, Karima? It's a calling. We are the feet on the ground working on prevention. We're still here because we've got outcomes and we speak up. We are the power of this movement. I'm proud to say that I've had the privilege of participating in CADCA Leadership Forum since 1999. and worked with 2 DFC-funded coalitions. I'll admit, I didn't go to the Hill my early CADCA days. I thought Sue was talking to someone else with a bigger voice and more confidence than me. I also thought someone else was doing the talking for the program and for my community. It wasn't my responsibility. I took for granted that the DFC and other substance abuse prevention programs were there. And that was clearly misguided thinking as we saw the Safe and Drug-Free Schools funding go to the wayside. In 2003, President George W. Bush keynoted at the forum. He spoke in support of substance abuse prevention work from the conflict in Afghanistan and DEA border efforts to local coalitions. After the address, the crowd spontaneously formed a receiving line in front of the stage. And to my surprise, the president started at one end of the stage and worked his way across the stage and reached out and shook every hand extended to him. Now, most of us know Rhonda Ramsey Molina, CADCA. We were in the back, and she's like, I want to go up there and shake his hand. I stood back because I thought, who am I? So as I'm watching her red head bob up on these big screens, working her way to the front of the stage, I guess I was moving forward myself, and I didn't really realize it. And the next thing I knew, the President of the United States of America's hand was reached out to me. And it took me a second to I was like, that one's mine. That's for me. And to this day, I was shocked. It was reached out to me. He was talking to me, just like Sue is talking to me and talking to you. CADCA was preparing me to tell my community's story. Today, as a member of CADCA, I'm reaching my hand out to you, and I want you to be brave and grab it. Go to the Hill and share with your congressional leaders and senators what your coalition has achieved and about the work that still needs to be done. Talk to the staffers with the same passion you would speak to their bosses. And when you go home, send them a thank you. And back at home, get to know the staffers in the district level. They're the ones who can really get you on the radar. Go and build the relationships with them. Just start getting them in the loop, sending them out your messages. I admitted I sat back and let someone else be responsible, but I get it now. I'm responsible. I was called, I was chosen to make a difference, just like you are. The Butler County Coalition sits in the districts of the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, and Senator Rob Portman, one of the original sponsors of the Drug-Free Communities Act. When I reached up and grabbed the president's hand, when I accepted Sue Thau's Go to the Hill charge, and when I realized I was responsible, I had no idea that one day I would be called and asked to help get the DFC reauthorization bill to the floor through my congressman. Just like you don't know what role your leaders may play in the future. And from what we've heard this morning, you're going to have to cultivate them into the leaders of the future. So build those relationships now. There is safety in numbers, so go to the Hill today with what you do know, your outcomes, the needs of your community, the needs of the field, and what role your committee leaders play today. It's in the packet. Show CADCA how big your brave is. Speak out and let the words fall out. Let them know that you support CADCA priorities, such as the Drug-Free Community Program Act, the 20% prevention set-aside, the STOP Act, marijuana prevention, prescription drug abuse prevention, underage drinking prevention, and so much more. We are the movement. We are the power. What are we? We are CADCA. Thank you.
Oh, you're brilliant. Yeah, we're amazing, aren't we? I love our field. Okay, I think we have time for one more person. Jerry Simpson, if you could please come up. Geraldine Simpson Jordan is the founder and CEO of San Bernardino Communities Against Drugs. She ran an amazingly successful drug prevention program there from 1985 to 2005. In 1991, she was appointed to the steering committee of President George H.W. Bush's Drug Advisory Council, where she was one of 6 individuals selected. That group is who came up with the idea for CADCA. Jerry was a founding board member of CADCA. She's still on our board today. She's one of my best, dearest friends. Welcome, Jerry Simpson-Jordan.
Sue, you're so adorable.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you, CADCA. You know, as Karen Murray was just standing up here and talking, I thought, you know, these stories seem like they're difficult and they're not real. And I, too, can tell you, it hasn't been that easy to go to your congressman or your senator and start talking. But one of the things that I've always believed in my heart, if you believe in what you're doing and you believe it deeply, you can do anything. And especially if you're a parent and now a grandparent, the needs will never stop. And the needs in the community are the same thing. I mean, I remember when I started having to fundraise for my son. I'm still fundraising. Not for my son, now my grandkids, but for CADCA. That's what it's about. That's how you have to believe in that. And I want to tell you, because of Sue Thau and because of the CADCA staff, I went to my congressman, Jerry Lewis, who at the time was one of the most powerful members on the Hill as chairman of the Appropriations Committee. And I gave him exactly those things in our packets. And I had to explain them. I had to actually explain them. Now, we think they're on this pedestal and they know all this. But honestly, they don't know all of this and they want to learn all of this. So I had to go there, give them that, and ask them to become involved. And I knew that it was extremely important to get my congressman involved, as well as his chief of staff and his other members, because they're the ones who are also going to be working on whatever we're asking for. So my message is to you is to share your story with so much enthusiasm that when they are listening to you, they really want to hear more. You know how when you have them lean forward a little bit like, what are you saying? Give them those kind of stories. You all have them. They need to be reminded that you are out there doing what they need to know about in their community. Immediately, and I think Ms. Murray just said this as well, when you return home right after the forum, make sure you send them a thank you note. You need to keep your face, your thoughts in their minds. And the unfortunate part is every day their phones are ringing, people are asking them for something. But what we have to do is make sure they understand that we are the most important. CADCA is the most important. Our coalitions are the most important. And we have to help educate and represent this drug-free community. And then, this is another thing that you need to really find out. When are they coming back home to the district? Find out when they're going to be there. Call and make another appointment. And believe it or not, after I have done this a time or two, I got to know the staff in there. I found out what they like for lunch. Crazy as it sounds, my congressman loved tacos from a little corner store right near his district office. So I would go buy tons of tacos so all the staff in there could have tacos, and we'd sit around and we'd talk about this. Unfortunately, sometimes Congressman Lewis would even say, well, tell me again about this Drug-Free Communities Act. And you have to start all over because they've been filled with so many things in their head. Then, as soon as I could see he was really coming around again and wanting to get involved, I'd say, you know what, Congressman, could I ask you just to go to maybe our Rotary meeting or our Chamber of Commerce meeting or out to the university and meet with a group of the president's staff out there? Well, it's hard to tell you no when you have a lot of enthusiasm and you know that this is important, so that's what I continue to do as well. And because of my connection to him, he did become a major champion of the Drug-Free Communities Act and the International Law Enforcement Demand Reduction Program, neither of which he would have ever known anything about had I not brought things to him from the Hill. So those are the kinds of things. We all can do this, believe me. It is not something just Sue Thau or Jerry can do. Every one of us can do this. And my congressman, Jerry Lewis, is now retired, but I will tell you something also. When he was still in office, I would always invite him to our drug-free kids program in the fall. Even if he could not attend, I would ask that he make a donation. Well, now that he's retired, I still invite him back. I did last year. Unfortunately, they couldn't come, but I sent the envelope onto the office where it asked for a donation, and they did send another check. Just because they're retired doesn't mean they shouldn't support us long after they leave the Hill. That's important to do. So, as Sue said earlier, we need to continue to find new champions. They're out there, and I know that all of you can continue to do that. That's why this Capitol Hill Day is so important. General Dean asked us yesterday to make sure that we were back here. It is wonderful to see this crowd here today. I am grateful to all of you to do that as well and to be here. So again, remind them how CADCA's all the different programs that they have going on, why they're important, and asking for their support is not difficult when you believe in it. As Sue said, keep swinging. We can't give up. Again, thank you very much. I am CADCA, and together we are the power of the movement. Thank you.
Okay. Well, our Hill Roundtable panelists are here. They're about to come out. This is such a big honor. So if you can come on out, I will be introducing everybody. So here we go. Congresswoman Karen Bass, Mike Fitzpatrick, Congresswoman Roybal-Allard, and Patrick Kennedy. Okay. Yes. Woo! Okay, I'm just going to do a quick introduction of each of them. Obviously, you know them. These are our champions. We love these people with a passion. And then Karen is actually going to be the moderator for the panel. So Congresswoman Karen Bass was elected to California's 37th district in Congress in 2010. Before being elected to Congress, she founded and ran a community coalition in South Los Angeles. Yes, Karen is one of us. She's a great friend and champion. How many of you watch MSNBC? She's on like 100 times a day. And we love Karen, and Karen's agreed to moderate this one for us. Okay. Congressman Mike Fitzpatrick, one of our newest champions. Yes. Congressman Fitzpatrick represents the 8th District of Pennsylvania. Where are you guys? Okay. Prior to this, he served on the Bucks County Board of Commissioners for 10 years. He's currently on the Financial Services Committee in the U.S. House. He's been a major champion for the substance abuse prevention field. He served as the lead Republican sponsor for the DFC Dear Colleague and sign-on letter for our appropriations. And he's one of our few Republican co-sponsors of the Sober Truth in Preventing Underage Drinking, the STOP Act. Thank you, Congressman.
Good bill.
Okay, the next member. Oh my gosh, we love her with a passion. Congresswoman Lucille Roybal-Allard. Yes, California's 40th district. She is the face of underage drinking prevention on Capitol Hill. Yes, she is the STOP Act. It was her idea. She came up with the idea. She worked to get it authorized and funded. She's a champion for everything we do. She's the most passionate person on the Hill about our underage drinking issues and how important communities are. Thank you, Congresswoman. Unbelievable. And last but not least, Congressman Patrick Kennedy, former member of Congress from Rhode Island. This is the man that is basically responsible for the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. And soon after his father, Ted Kennedy's death, he left Congress and co-founded the Next Frontier campaign, One Mind for Research. He's also on the Smart Approaches to Marijuana's board. He's on TV. He's on this issue. We love him. Yep, thank you. Okay. And we are going to let Congresswoman Bass take it over from there, and you can continue sitting so you don't have to stand up here.
Thank you. Well, good morning, CADCA. It is wonderful to be here. I come to CADCA conferences every year, and so I'm very pleased to be here with you this morning with some of my colleagues. And what we'd like to do this morning is to have a conversation. And before I start that conversation, though, I want everybody to give another round of applause for the tremendous leadership of CADCA under General Dean and Sue Thau. They have been leading the charge for years. And so we're going to jump right into it. And I thought I would begin by asking my colleagues here to talk about how they got involved in the drug and alcohol prevention field. What sparked your involvement? And maybe we can each take a shot at that question. Mike,
You want me to start?
start us off.
Thank you, Karen, for the question, and thanks for your leadership. The mics are turned on. You guys can hear us okay? Okay, well, thanks for the work that you do as well. Representative Kennedy and I, when we were in the green room getting ready to come out, I talked a little bit about my involvement before Congress with your organizations and the great work that you do in local communities. As you heard in the introduction, I served as a local official for 10 years. A lot of members of Congress have come through state houses. They were governors, they were attorneys general. I was a county commissioner in a place called Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is a beautiful piece of real estate between, you know where it's at? Bucks County, right between the city of Philadelphia and the city of Trenton, New Jersey. I hit the city lines on both sides of my district, so it's a neat area, and it's governed by a board of commissioners, which are 3 people, and they're both legislative and executive. And when Patrick and I were talking, I said, you know, county commissioners, not just in Pennsylvania, but local officials throughout the country, we in the nation's capital debate funding and programs on the macro level of the things that you do, but we then send the dollars that are appropriated from Washington to some local official somewhere to implement a program, actually run the program. And then the programs, the dollars are contracted out to organizations, and there are great organizations in Bucks County, and I know my colleagues have great organizations in their districts as well. And so that was my background, and that was the background that I brought to Washington. And I always sort of wish that there were more county officials in the nation's capital, because they know when there are discussions about, well, why don't we just cut this program or reduce that program, they actually know the faces and the stories of the people back home that are being affected. It's not just a number or a report, something anecdotal, it's something real. And that experience that I had and the relationships that I have back home in my county and in my district are invaluable to me as I make those decisions. And as Karen said and Sue said in the introduction, you know, one of the few Republican sponsors of Lucille's bill to stop underage drinking, I've tried to take that role within the caucus, within the Republican caucus, to be that voice of reason on the issues that I know are important to you. So let me just end by, I'll just end by saying thank you for what you do. You're an inspiration to me. I know the good work you do, and I'm proud to be able to be an advocate for you down here.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Lucille.
Well, first of all, I too want to join in commending CADCA for the tremendous work that you've done throughout the years. You're so important to our ability to advance the issue of the negative impact of underage drinking and drug abuse. So thank you very, very much for that. And it's always a pleasure to be here every year. I look forward to this. My involvement with alcohol or interest in alcohol and drug abuse actually started in my other life before I was in politics. I worked for alcohol and drug programs, and I saw firsthand how destructive the use of alcohol and drugs were, not only to the individual, but to families, and to the impact it had primarily on children. And very often, when parents were using, eventually, depending on the age of the children, they too started to experiment and to drink or to experiment with drugs. And it created this cycle. So when I came to Washington and I got onto the Appropriations Committee, at the time I was on the committee, subcommittee was Treasury Postal, and we funded the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And we were putting about $1 million into drug prevention, but alcohol was not included in that. So I thought, well, you know, it must have been an oversight. So all I did was introduce one little amendment that simply said that in addition to in the anti-drug campaign, that they would also include the dangers of underage drinking. Well, you'd think I had started World War III.
Right.
I was called a neo-prohibitionist.
Right.
They came in force. The beer wholesalers, Discus, they came to Washington. And I had colleagues coming to me and saying, my God, Lucille, what in the world are you doing?
Right.
You're trying to kill jobs in my district. You're hurting my district. There's no way I can support what you're trying to do and eliminate beer. And so I had a copy of my 1-2-line amendment, and they couldn't believe the difference between what I was actually trying to do and what they were being told. And so since I was not able to get that one amendment, I decided then I was going to introduce a bill. And that's how the STOP Act came into being. And I just want to end with saying, if it were not for CADCA and the advocacy and all the work that you have done, it would not have been law. It was because of you that it became law. And now, as you know, we're in the battle to get it reauthorized. Thank you.
Well, Patrick, as I ask you to answer that question, maybe you could also add in and talk to us about SAM, as you called it, Smart Approaches to Marijuana.
Well, thank you, Susan, and to Mike and Lucille. You all are tremendously fortunate, as I know you already recognize, to have proactive legislators who are so forward-thinking on this. And don't underestimate, as Lucille just pointed out, the opposition that they get for being on the right side of this issue. So when my good friend Lucille was talking about the torrent of opposition that came down on her when she was trying to do something modest on underage drinking, it just reminded me, déjà vu.
Right.
Déjà vu. Because as you know, right now on the marijuana fight, we are getting the same extremist responses to something that is very simple, and that is we do not want to increase access and availability and reduce the perception of harm of a drug that can have enormous harm on the developing brain of our young people, just as Sue Thau said. So for all of those of you who just stood up, you can come at 7:30 tonight. We're going to have a rally at Chesapeake
D to F.
D through F at 7:30, D through F, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. We're trying to lose this moniker that anyone who is pro-public health is for locking up people. We have to separate these two issues.
Right.
And when I worked with Lucille, we worked together on the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act, and let me tell you, there's nothing more inconsistent with trying to improve the mental health and reduce substance abuse disorders in this country than to legalize a third drug in this country at the same time. But thank you. You got to know how good this feels because I'm a former member of Congress, meaning I don't get all this great applause anymore, so I'll take it wherever I can get it. The last thing, and perhaps the most important thing I'll say, is I'm a person in long-term recovery because so what informs my passion about this is that in my family, when we had anxiety and depression, which we had a lot of, okay, we self-medicated because we couldn't show the world what we were going through. And that was my model of coping as a teenager. And of course, I had the genetic predisposition to become an alcoholic and addict. I didn't even know it. And furthermore, my physicians, nor anyone else in my life, told me about the fatal nature of this illness. So the beauty about our opportunity with Parity now is that it is requirement under law that we all get a checkup from the neck up when we go to the doctors.
Checkup from the neck up. That's great. I love checkup from the neck up. I will remember that. You know, as you mentioned, Patrick, the deja vu nature of what Lucille was talking about, I remember very well, and Sue, you remember this too, when the community coalition that I started in LA, when we chose to take on liquor stores, oh my gosh, I was called everything under the sun. And it eventually led to them attacking our funding. You remember that? And they cut the funding to the community coalitions when they went in that direction. And so the opposition, just as you said, cannot be underestimated. One of the things that I know CADCA is going to do today is you're going to be on the Hill. And we all welcome you to come to the Hill. It's very important that you go. And so now I would like to ask my colleagues, what is your advice for when people come to the Hill and come to your offices and talk to you? What do you think is the most effective approach that they can use to convince a member of Congress that might not be convinced or might be going down the road of thinking that things are okay, especially with the marijuana issue? But how do you think your colleagues in the Republican caucus should be approached on this issue?
Well, I think, the approach is going to be pretty similar, no matter who the representative, what the party, what region of the country. The most effective approach, the most effective meeting that I have, and you can imagine we have a lot of folks coming to see us. We have constituents, we have folks, policy experts, subject matter experts, and industry lobbyists. The most effective individuals that come to my office are my constituents. And those constituents who come in and meet with me and look me in the eye and tell me a very personal story.
Yes.
Story about somebody in my community, somebody I represent, somebody perhaps that I know. And even more than that, and I've told this story many times, I had a young constituent from Central Bucks come in, talk to me about childhood cancer and funding. I go back home and I say, this was the most effective lobbyist that ever came to my office. Right. Was this young girl, and she's doing great, and she's actually in high school now in Central Bucks. To hear that story, and then, for children under 16, we can actually take them on the floor. We were voting on funding, and I brought her and her sister on the floor, and she helped me She helped me with that process. I'll just leave it at that. She was there with me while I voted.
Vote no now. Huh?
That's right. So,
Can't do it.
you know, so that would be my simple advice. You just
Yes.
go in, you know, ask to meet with the member. If for some reason you can't see your representative, take out a piece of paper while you're with the staff member and say, I'm writing the representative a note right here, and I'm going to ask you to just hand it to him or her after we leave, because they will see it. If you ask that, they will see it. And write a personal story. Ask to meet back in the district if you couldn't meet here in Washington. Ask them to come to your programs, come to your community meetings, meet with the families that are affected by the funding or lack of funding for your programs. But it's just, I guess I'll just end by saying, just be yourself, be human. Tell the story. Nobody tells it better than you. And believe me when I tell you, you will be effective more than you know.
Absolutely.
I kind of just want to say ditto, 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 because I think Mike has really touched some of the key points in being effective when you're meeting with your member of Congress. And again, I want to repeat what he said. I think one of the most effective ways is to actually have constituents from the member's district there talking to them. Also, if you have any statistics or data or anything that shows what is happening in a member's district with regard to alcohol and drug abuse, that's also very, very important. And one way of also of being effective is that you keep on point, that you talk to a member, and I wouldn't go over 15 minutes in terms of what your presentation is unless the member themselves engage you, because very often members have back-to-back meetings, they have other things that are going on, and if you deviate from your message or you're there too long, then we start thinking, oh my gosh, bells are going to start ringing for votes, I have to go to hearing, and you lose the impact of your original message. Also, if for some reason you're not able to meet with your member, if you meet with staff, I don't want you to be discouraged and feel that you weren't effective because you met with staff, because we depend very heavily on the input and the research that our staff does. And they are in a position where they advise us in terms of various issues and positions that they would recommend, and they have all the data and information. So they will present your arguments to us when we are dealing with a particular issue.
Just to add to what Lucille said, I think Mike's point about going back to the district and also meeting with your members of Congress in your district, and it doesn't have to be a CADCA event. If you show up and it's a community event and you're there to ask a question, you also introduce this subject to people who aren't as well versed in it in the public besides yourselves. So I often found my elderly constituents very interested in this because they're worried about their grandkids. And, you know, I show up at a senior event, no one expects me to talk about, you know, drug addiction. And I'm telling you, when someone brings up the subject, all the elderly want to talk about it. So just don't be fixated on it has to be a certain way. Be open-minded with the ways you approach this when it comes to reaching members back in their districts.
Can I just add one thing
Sure,
to
of course.
that? Also, particularly in the issues that we all care about, it isn't a one-time thing or a once a year. This is something that you have to continue to contact your member of Congress and ask them, have you signed on to the STOP Act? And to continue that advocacy so that they are aware of the importance of the issue, and it's not just a one-time contact that you make with them.
And let me just add on a couple of things. As Lucille was just mentioning, ask if a member has signed on, and understand that there are thousands of pieces of legislation, and oftentimes it isn't until you mention a particular piece of legislation that it comes to that person's attention. So it's critically important that you do that. And Lucille was a little more diplomatic than I'll be. I think it's really important to get to the point and be brief, but telling a story is critically important, because I actually believe that what we remember is when a person connects with us emotionally. And because you can imagine there's people, sometimes we're scheduled in 15 to 30-minute intervals before we're going from meeting to meeting on subjects all over the place. But you remember that person that connects with you emotionally because they have told you a story. So having somebody's testimony in the community and inviting people, members to meetings or their staff, I also think is critically important. So finally, I'd like to ask if we could each talk about what our priorities are right now. Legislation that you're working on, or efforts that you're supporting in communities.
Well, my focus, and I hope that's going to be one of the focus of CADCA when you're on the Hill, is to get more support for the reauthorization of the STOP Act. The STOP Act, the authorization ran in 2011, and we have not been able to get it reauthorized. But I have been able to get the money through the appropriation process to keep the programs going. So it's very, very important that you advocate and push for more members, both Republicans and Democrats, to sign on to the bill. Because the way things are right now, I think we have about 52, 53 sponsors. And we have Republican and Democrats that have signed on to it. And I really want to commend Mike for his leadership in helping us get that Republican support, which is so critical. But before we can get the attention of the committee staff and of the chairman, we need to have, at a minimum, 100 co-sponsors. Then they start looking at the bill a little more seriously. So as I said, we're around a little over 50. So if you could help us get to 100 and more, that would be a huge help in pushing the STOP Act to the front of the committee's agenda. And I look forward to working with you on that.
Well, Lucille, I'm glad you mentioned that because I would also like to help you get those co-sponsors. So thank you for mentioning that, and I'll join in. I know I'm already a co-sponsor, but definitely join in. And Patrick, if you could tell us, but one thing I would like to ask you if you would expand on a little more, and that is the distinction between people who support public health being confused with, encouraging more incarceration. Because as we were talking in the green room, and Sue and I and General Dean and I have talked about, I'm very concerned about people who are incarcerated, especially for nonviolent drug offenses, when we know this is a public health issue. And those of us that are questioning the legalization of marijuana are then made to feel as though we're supporting continued incarceration.
So, thank you, Susan. So unfortunately, in the public's mind, we've conflated the two separate issues, and that is the onerous imposition of adverse sentences on minority populations as opposed to the majority population. So in other words, the criminal justice system is rife with discrimination and prejudice towards minority communities. But that applies to all enforcement decisions, okay? Right. It's not just drugs and alcohol. It's no matter you're stopped and driving while black because you're driving your car, or you're stopped because someone suspects you of shoplifting because you're African American. This is a pervasive problem that's within our criminal justice system. So do not confuse that with saying that the answer to that is to change the drug laws, which frankly, we cannot afford to have, as you fought in LA, 8 times the number of liquor stores in minority neighborhoods as majority neighborhoods. So, the problem with legalization is that it's going to be a for-profit industry like the liquor industry, and what they're going to have is a bunch of lobbyists now, just like Lucille and Mike are fighting the liquor lobby to get anything funded in terms of public health and prevention. So that is the biggest argument Now, we can still fund drug courts, which we should be doing. We can still do what President Obama has decided to do, and that's reduce the disparity in sentencing towards those with certain drug convictions. And so all of these things can be done without us creating a whole new legalized industry. So the two do not have to be separate issues.
Thank you. Mike.
Well, I think this is the last question, so I want to say thanks for letting me be part of the discussion. This was great fun and very informative for me, and I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. As you know, Lucille is a legislative leader on important issues, including the bill that she talked about that I co-sponsor. Patrick is, as a former member of Congress, was a legislative leader, but has taken that experience, both his personal experience and his legislative experience, into the community to be, in a way that legislators can't be, a much more forceful advocate, as you hear that he is. And I found out this morning, actually, we're almost neighbors. We knew we were from the northeast part of the country, but we actually live fairly close to each other. So I look forward on that advocacy side, back in the community, maybe the chance to work together with Representative Kennedy on some issues. But when Karen said, what are your priorities? As legislators, we have, sort of legislative priorities, bills, funding those priorities, funding the legislation, which Lucille talked about, and then things going on back in the community. And all of those, they're all important to a representative in Congress. I just want to mention on legislative and funding, which is what we do in our Washington, D.C. based life, since we have two lives. We have a Washington life and we have a life back home. Lucille talked about the Stop Underage Drinking, and there are two bills that I would really like to see my staff, and I will redouble and recommit my efforts to see if we can get them, find the right vehicle to make them the law. Lucille talked about the Stop Underage Drinking. The second bill I want to mention, because there are a lot of the same co-sponsors. Representative Wolf from Northern Virginia is, I think, very active, original co-sponsor with Lucille. The second bill is the Stop Oxy Act, which would require physicians to certify that pain is not just moderate, but is severe before they can prescribe drugs that we all know, the evidence shows, is subject to abuse. There are too many of them out there. They're too easily prescribed. They're being sold and resold. We have drug take-back programs in our community. I'm sure that you're involved in them throughout the country, constantly trying to get all these prescription drugs out of the medicine cabinets and back under control. But that bill would change the way that these highly addictive controlled substances are being prescribed, and we really need to do that. So we got the legislative, and then we have to fund. And I'll just sort of wrap up by saying the funding is, a legislation program, and you guys out there with the great organizations, without the funding behind you, it hamstrings what you're able to do. And so I was able to work with Representative Levin on the drug-free programs.
Yes, drug-free communities.
Drug-free communities programs. We asked for $93 million. We actually got $92 million funded in the budget this year. And so we'll fight for good legislation. We'll fight for funding. And I look forward to working with my community organizations back in the 8th District of Pennsylvania, as well as Lucille and Patrick back in the communities throughout the country. So great work. Keep it up.
Yes. Wonderful. And Karen, can you share what your priorities are?
I'm sorry?
Can you share what your legislative priorities are?
Oh, sure. Working a lot on fighting for the funding and supporting the legislation of my colleagues, and always on that appropriation side, and I'm sure everybody understands what that is, which is the committee that writes the checks. That's where our emphasis has to be. And so I want to continue to do that. I also have a piece of legislation for young people who have financial aid and they might have had a drug problem, and I want to make sure that they're not prohibited from continuing to get their financial aid. So we have an awful lot of work to do. I want to welcome everyone when they come to the Hill. I'm located in the Cannon Building, and hopefully you'll stop by and give us a shout out as well. And if you need any help along the way, but let me just emphasize finally, you guys make all the difference in the world when you come to the Hill, when you talk to members of Congress, ask them to co-sponsor the legislation. Please share your stories, and remember, most of us go home every weekend, and typically 1 week out of the month, we are in our districts. So don't think this is the only time you have to come see us. So welcome, see you on the Hill, and another shout out and congratulations to CADCA's leadership that has continued on for many years. Thank you very much.
All right. Woo.
Good job.